This is the first lecture on Chapter 9, and on Chapter 9 we're going to start talking about global information systems. The objectives for this chapter are, first of all, we want to discuss the reasons why we would use globalization, why globalization is occurring, and how information systems play into that. We'll talk a little bit about e-business and internet growth. We've already talked about those things, but we'll talk about those in the framework of globalization. The second objective, of course, is to describe the global information systems and the components of those systems. Thirdly, we're going to explain the types of organizational structures that we can use with global information systems, and we'll explore that a little bit. We're going to discuss some of the obstacles to using global information systems, and they're a little bit different than our normal information systems or local information systems. So let's look at this. Why would we want to even go global? Of course, you can look at revenues and that kind of thing, but let's look at what happened to our world. So the idea here is that we have customers worldwide who are now demanding services and services and products. And those services and products actually are involved in all different areas of the world. For instance, the book talks about a shoe company, and the shoe company produces the leather and the uppers for the shoes in Italy. So that's where the best leather is going to be, and the craftsmen that produce the shoes, the leathers and the uppers, are in Italy. Those uppers then are shipped to China, where the soles are put on to the shoes. So there's better cost savings by shipping them to China and still maintaining the quality of the shoe. Then the shoes get shipped back to Ireland, where they're tested, and finally they're sold in the United States. So you in fact do have a global system here, and if we can integrate that system with our information systems, then we can manage the logistics and the sales of these shoes, distribution and sales of these shoes. So that's one example of why you would have a global information system. In 2008, the Coca-Cola Company estimated that more than 80% of its revenues were coming from outside of the United States. That's huge, 80%. And so Coca-Cola, as you know, is in Georgia, the United States, and it needed to manage its businesses outside of the United States. And so a global information system would allow Coca-Cola to do that. So let's look at what are the prerequisites to having a successful global information system. It's not quite as simple as having a local system. There are a lot of other factors that we need to understand. For instance, there are different customs, sometimes even different standards, but different customs in how business is done. So that's a business issue. But the information system then also has to reflect those different customs. There are different laws regulating not only the information systems, but how we do business. So our global information system has to be flexible enough to actually comply with those laws. Each country may have a different set of technical issues. For instance, we know that the electricity is different in different parts of the world. In some places we're AC, alternating current, and others were direct current. And so even that alone is going to affect our computer components. So if we do have hardware in different locations throughout the globe, we have to purchase different types of hardware, different types of power systems. Also, there might be different issues with the network. So we have to look at our networks and see what can and cannot be processed or transferred in each of these different localities. And then, of course, there's going to be a local business needs and practices. Again, the way we do business in the U.S. is not necessarily the way it's done throughout the U.S. There are going to be issues such as value-added taxes. In many parts of the world, we don't have those in the United States, but the other parts of the world don't necessarily have sales tax. So all of these things are going to have to go into our integrated system in the software portion of it, and then we have hardware issues as well, hardware and peripherals. So the first really large-scale global system were airline reservation systems, and these go way back, really back into the 1980s, 1990s, and when Sabre came out. And the idea here was that we would be able to make airline reservations electronically throughout the world, regardless of where we were. So if I'm in New York City, I can make a reservation in Shanghai, and so on and so forth. This did not exist prior to that, and you would have to make lots of phone calls, and it was quite a time-consuming event to make these reservations. So the airline system that we have today was really the precursor of global information systems. Tracking is much easier this way, of course, and if there's a flight that's delayed, say for instance overseas or in a different location, we know about it immediately. Another factor in globalization or global information system is the fact that we have global products. We have products now that go around the world. For instance, your iPhone is in all the markets all over the world, and so these products and services have been standardized, and so we can sell them in more places, and that's going to require, again, information systems so that we can handle the supply chain effectively, and so that we can make sure that our transactions are handled correctly. Our manufacturer might regionalize some operations based on the locale that they're at. So we need to be able to deal with those regionalizations. And so another reason for a GIS, Global Information System. And it is, as I mentioned before, a totally important factor in the purchasing and supply chain. The fact that we could purchase from all over the world, think about where all of our products come from, and then it would be local for local sales. If you think about a car manufacturer, for instance, not all the parts are made in one location, and so we need to coordinate all of the logistics for all those parts. The parts could perhaps be made overseas, maybe in the UK or in China or in Germany, and then they're assembled somewhere else, and then finally the final assembly is done maybe in the US, in Tennessee, or someplace like that. So a real push for globalization. Localization is a lot less prevalent. An example of a company that has done a great job actually in creating its global information systems is Rohm and Haas. They are a part of Dow Chemical, and they had actually lots of different types of production and different divisions in many, many different countries. They overhauled their global information system primarily by upgrading their order entry system, and it added some huge efficiencies. They also were able to add a materials management modules, which allowed them to manage their materials everywhere. The example in the book talks about how there might be inventory in one place, in one division, and because the systems didn't talk to each other in another division, we wouldn't know that there's inventory one place and not inventory somewhere else. So for instance, if you had a customer who was in France and they wanted a particular item, and the manufacturer and distribution center in France did not have that inventory, the people in France would not know that just a few miles away in Germany that part actually existed, that unit actually existed. By globalizing the information system, in other words, integrating that information system, now the division knows, oh yeah, just a few miles away, we've got this item, we can go ahead and ship this to the customer. We're going to ship it from Germany instead of France, but now our customer is going to be much happier. So the globalization, in essence, has made them more efficient and made them, allowed them to add a service to their customer, to provide better service, and to actually handle the sales that they need to. One of the forces behind globalization, of course, is e-business. You guys probably take that for granted, that there's always been e-business and that you can purchase things online. You don't actually have to go to a storefront, or you don't actually have to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. And e-business, of course, then allows us, whether we be a small firm or a large firm, allows us to purchase and to sell things throughout the globe. The constraint here would be, how do we get it over there if it's a particular item? Services are a little different, but the distribution becomes a focus rather than the actual finding of the customers. The internet has made it easy for us to actually find customers and to communicate with these customers no matter where they are in the world. I worked for a local company for a long time, and we actually did distribution in the Middle East, and we had vendors in the Pacific Rim, and this was before the internet was widely used, and we had to use faxes and we had to call on the phone, and it was a very clumsy way to distribute goods. It also made it very difficult to locate customers throughout the globe. The opportunities expanded exponentially when the internet became commonplace and people were able to source and to purchase online. As I mentioned, small businesses can conduct business online just like large businesses. This opens a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs or smaller businesses to compete in this global marketplace. And one of the ways that we do that as small businesses is we need to have an information system that's going to allow us to do that. I'm going to stop here and I'll pick up again on part 2.